So I'll read it slowly. You try to pull out the basic facts. Hear my cry, O God, attend unto my prayer. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. Now, without a pencil and a half an hour, 45 minutes, that was probably a little difficult. But once you you list out those basic facts, you'll probably find that as you listed them, there's a lot of duplicates or facts that could be combined together. And when you do that, then you could put them in a logical order that builds on the previous fact so that it's a help. Now, we don't have time for each of you to present yours, even if you wanted to. So let's take a look at mine. This is what I did with this passage, and let's see what mine has seen. Number one, hearts get overwhelmed. Hearts get overwhelmed. That is a basic fact taught on this passage. It's a plain basic fact. The passage says when, not if. When my heart is overwhelmed. Hearts get overwhelmed. The heart is the center of things. It's the center of our life, the center of our emotions, the center of our thoughts, the center of our desires. And at times we get overwhelmed. Now, really the picture, if you take the whole picture in context, the picture that's being drawn here is of a man who is on a low rock out in the ocean. Maybe close to shore, but on a low rock that sticks just partly out of the water. Now, if you've been around the ocean at all, you'll know that there are times when the ocean is so calm that you could sit out there on that rock, get a nice suntan, and have a nice enjoyable time sitting on that rock. And you're just enjoying the day. But then the clouds begin to gather. And then the sky starts to get dark. And then the waves start moving a little bit. And the next thing you know, that same man who was sitting on this rock in the calm and enjoying himself is now clinging for life. Wave after wave tries to rip him off of this rock. And he is clinging for all these words and gasping for breath in between the deluge of the water as it tries to rip him from this rock. He is being overwhelmed. Same rock, same ocean, but now there's turmoil added to it. That's the picture that is being drawn here. Now, the fact of the matter is everybody in this room is in various stages of that storm. For some, right now, the sun is shining on you. There is not a cloud in the sky. You look up and everything is, boy, this is nice. Life is calm for me today. For others, you can see a few clouds gathering on the horizon. For others, boy, it's starting to get a little dark here. For others, the waves are just starting to break over your head, and you realize I'm in for a serious storm here. Others sitting here today, you can feel your strength waning as you're trying to hold on for your dear life. You are being overwhelmed. And for others, the storm is slowly starting to pass and you feel like, okay, I'm going to make it through here. Although one might wish it, life is not all sunshine and happiness. The reality is life is full of storms. Now, some of these storms stem from our own actions. We've done some stupid thing, and now the storm is raging over us because of our own actions. Others of the storms are just part of living on planet Earth. But my friends, the storms of life come. They may be financial, they may be health, they may be storms in your family, storms in your job, they may be the loss of a loved one, they may be a storm in your personal walk with the Lord. The storms are many and varied. But you can take it to the bank. You will face them in your life, and many of these storms will be overwhelming. Now, here's the reality. There are some people who are stronger than others. Have you noticed that? There are some people who, when these storms come, they can just take it. They tough it out better. They handle it better. You look at them and you think, man alive, what's going on? How can they do this? You're having the same type of situation and you're about to crumble, and they're just standing there and it rolls on. The old timers used to say, like water off a duck's back. That's what seems to happen with them, and you say, what in the world? I wish I was as strong as that person. And you're envious of them and wish you were like them. But let me point out a little fact on this. Toughing it out only postpones the solution. It doesn't calm the storm, it just prolongs the agony. That's the reality of it. And the other part is, everybody gets overwhelmed. No matter how strong you are, no matter how tough you are, no matter how much you are able to handle, you know what? What I have found is life has a way of matching whatever you got. It has a way of coming up and overwhelming you, bringing more pressure to bear than you can handle. Eventually, everybody gets overwhelmed. So this is our first plain basic fact. Number one, hearts get overwhelmed. Number two might throw you a little bit. Number two, there is an enemy. Verse number 3, for thou hast a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. There is an enemy. You know what? Intermingled with the storms of life, there's an enemy. Unfortunately for us, we often either ignore this fact or completely misidentify the enemy in the situation. When I was volunteering at Meyer Hall, one of the things I used to ask the kids on a regular basis is, who is your greatest enemy? And you have to understand the social workers had been doing their work there, and so I got this answer almost always. I'd say, who's your greatest enemy? And they would say, me. I am my own worst enemy. Almost every time you get that answer. Now, there is some truth, by the way, to that fact, that you're your own worst enemy. But that is not your greatest enemy. And when I would say, well, I understand that, but who is your greater enemy than that? Well, then they would sit there and try to think about who it was. And they would say, well, in my neighborhood, there's a couple of guys who would like to kill me. Now, you would think, well, they're just blowing smoke. They're just, exaggerating. But the fact of the matter is, many of them already had knife scars and bullet wounds. You're like, okay, they are serious. There's somebody that actually wants to kill them. And you say, well, that's a pretty good sized enemy. But after I would work through that, I'd say, no, you have got a greater enemy than that. And after they'd sit there for a while and they'd think through every person that they knew, then they'd say, oh, you mean the devil. Now, it never shocked me that it took them so long to come up with, that was always their last answer. You know why it doesn't shock me? Because God's people who know the truth, for sure, come up with that same thing. For some reason, we act like the devil doesn't exist. We act like he is not part of the situation. But do you have to understand that every situation in your life, the devil wants to be a part. He is your greatest enemy. We spend much of our time arguing with the neighbor. But do you realize the devil is a liar and a deceiver and a divider of people? And so we're all mad at the people around us when we're actually the greater cause. The one who's causing it all is the devil. And somehow we completely ignore that fact. We get all upset with our neighbors, store owners, family members, and the politicians in Washington. We treat them like the enemy, but all the time we're ignoring the true enemy we have. You get mad at that guy at work, but how do you expect him to act? He doesn't know any better, and he's being lied to and deceived by and twisted by the devil to divide himself from everybody. How do you expect him to act? How do you expect the politicians in Washington to act when they're being lied to and be deceived by the devil himself? How do you expect them to act? We fight the powers of Satan. We fight the pawns of Satan and rarely even recognize that the devil is the main driving force behind it. We are fighting, we're tilting at windmills, as they used to say. We are fighting the secondary causes. We're fighting the people who have no idea what's going on, and we get all upset with them, not recognizing the fact that there is an enemy, my friend, and it's a lot greater than the guy that crossed the street from you. Now ask yourself this question. What power does the devil have? Now, I'm not asking you how powerful the devil is. We know that as a fallen angel, he is extremely powerful. But how much power does he have? I'm going to let you contemplate that for a second. How much power? Answer that biblically in your mind. How much power does the devil have? When Christ died on the cross, how complete was his victory? Mostly complete, kind of complete, absolutely 100% total victory. Obviously, the scripture teaches. Genesis 3 describes it as he crushes the serpent's head. Colossians 2 tells us, having spoiled principalities and powers, he made a show of them openly, triumphing over them in it. Basically translated, that means he ran over them and then backed up and ran over them again. It was a total annihilation, a complete and total victory. Do you believe that? Do you believe that Christ is the all-victorious Savior? Do you believe that we can live in his victory? So then ask the question, how much power does this Satan have? And you know what the answer to that is? Only what we give him. That's how much power he has. Only what we give him. This may come to a shock to you, but in World War II, after the Allies defeated the Japanese on certain small islands, do you know that they left the Japanese in charge? After they defeated them, they left the Japanese in charge because the people on those islands could not live in the liberty that they had just received. That makes your head scratch, doesn't it? It's like, wait a second. We beat them and then left them in charge? Yes. Now, that's not a great illustration, but it does bring us into the neighborhood. We have victory in Christ. The devil has been totally defeated. Except for we give the victory back. We allow him to have power in our world and in our lives. That's the power the devil has, the power that we give him. Because Christ is the victorious Savior. We get so caught up being mad or irritated or frustrated or critical with the people involved in our storms that we do not even challenge the work of the one true enemy in the situation. We've got to change this. We've got to quit fighting these secondary causes and getting mad at the people and irritated with the people around us and go right to the source of the problem, which is us allowing the devil to have power in our lives, letting him run free course we must recognize that there is an enemy. Our hearts get overwhelmed. Number 2, there is an enemy. Number 3, there is a rock. There is a rock. Now, this is obviously a reference to the Lord. There's no doubt in anybody's mind about that. He is referring to this high rock. He's referring to the Lord. Now, if you made your list of basic facts at the beginning, then you will find this fact is a combination of all the other facts. Look at verses 2, 3, and 4. There's basic statements here. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. For thou hast been a shelter for me and a strong tower from the enemy. I will abide in thy tabernacle forever. I will trust in the covert of thy wings. The rock is actually defined here in 4 different ways. If you were writing out your basic facts, you would have written down 4 different things that the rock is described as. It's described as a shelter, a strong tower, a dwelling place, and under the wings, the covert of the wings. Now, each one of these gives us a different flavor of the rock. The word shelter here is from the rain or the storms. It's a shelter. Get out of the storm. The storms would be natural happenings in life. And you have shelter from those natural things that take place because you live on planet Earth. A strong tower has a more idea of a defense from an attacking enemy. The tabernacle is a dwelling place. It's an abiding, a constant place to live. It's not a temporary thing. Under the wings, the covert of the wings. You know, some of the scholars believe that this could be referring to the wings of the cherubs that cover the ark in the Holy of Holies, the Ark of the Covenant, the mercy seat there. There were wings there. Some of the scholars believe that that's what this is referring to. I don't know about that. Here's why I don't know about that. When you talk about rocks, and you talk about strong towers, and you talk about dwelling places, those are all kind of hard, aren't they? Cold, hard defense. Does that really describe our safety in the Lord? But when you talk about under the shadow of his wings, under the covering of his wings, you're talking about a mother hen who gathers her chicks underneath, near to her heart, in complete protection. It gives you a whole different feel for this thing. Yes. In fact, Christ uses that same illustration in Matthew chapter 23, I believe it is. He uses that same illustration. And I think this is more what David's referring to. Yes, you're in a strong tower, but it's really close to the heart of God. You're on a high rock, but it's not this uncomfortable, just stoic kind of deal. This is a place of love and protection, is what I think this means. Now, if we plug this back into the original picture of a man who's on a low rock being pounded by the storm, what do we have? We plug this back in. What we have is this same man living in a place high above the storm, a place that is both safe from storm and from attack, not some cold, dark, hard place, but a place near the heart of God himself. Get that picture in your mind. You can either be down here on this low rock, being pounded to death by life and the attacks of the enemy, or you can be up in this high rock, above the storm, safe from the attacks, in a place of love. Those are the 2 pictures being drawn here. Now, in our day and age, when we think about warfare, we think about smart bombs, Patriot missiles, and drones. And we sometimes forget the significance of the high ground. But if you know anything about military history, up until 100 years ago, the high ground was well understood what it meant. If you know anything about the American Civil War, you'll know that although the South should have not had even the slightest chance, they couldn't stand with us at all. We just had way too much. But for the first 3 years, they basically fought us to a standstill. They basically actually were winning the war. And you say, how can that be? They should not have been able to shine our shoes. How could that have been? I'll tell you how it was. because Lee, their commanding officer, would choose the high ground. He would look at the spot and find the best ground there to defend, and he would choose that and then make the North attack him. Yes. And every single time, we got whooped. It was bad. In fact, they were almost to win the war. And you know when that changed? Gettysburg. You know what happened at Gettysburg? One cavalry officer decided, I'm not going to let Lee have the high ground this round. I'm going to stay here and fight until we can get here and get set up before he gets here. And so for the first really time in the Civil War, we had the high ground. The North had the high ground. And for the next 3 days, Lee took a beating. A beating that basically they lost the war because of it. The importance of the high ground. That's the difference. And this is why the illustration is so important. You're not in this low spot. You are in a strong defensive position when you are in this high rock. It is of great importance. A rock high, safe, strong, secure, and loving. Our hearts get overwhelmed. There is an enemy. There is a rock. Number 4, true prayer is the key. True prayer is the key. There's no doubt in our lives, in anybody's mind here, that each of us have found ourselves overwhelmed at some point or another. Now, scholars debate the meaning of the phrase, from the end of the earth. Let's see if we can read that here. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. Scholars debate that. And they have all kinds of creative explanations for that. And those explanations may have some merit, but let me ask you. If you've ever been with your heart overwhelmed, don't you feel like you're a million miles from any help? Don't you feel like you're on the backside of nowhere all by your lonesome? Just you and your trouble all by your lonesome. Isn't that how you feel? From the end of the earth? I think that pretty much sums up the whole thing. When you figure out how I feel when my heart is overwhelmed, I feel like I'm on the backside of no place, nobody cares, and I'm all here by myself. I think that's what David was referring to, from the end of the earth. Now here's the problem. In times like these, we have a tendency to withdraw from God. We don't feel like reading His Word. We don't feel like praying. We feel disconnected. And when we feel disconnected, we have 2 different things that we do. One, we sit in our solitude and pity ourselves. All right, let's be honest. How many of you have ever done that? You sit in your solitude and have a pity party. Oh, how bad I am. And you rehearse over and over again how bad your life is. This is one of the things we do. We pity ourselves and we wallow in this self-misery. The other option that we have, that we take, is we spread this misery around. We tell our misery to anybody who will listen. Now, I know you've never done that, but how many have ever had somebody to do that to you? They are just really free with all the details of their life and tell you how nasty it is and how terrible it is and how everybody has mistreated them. And guess what? You hear it and you have pity on them. And so for about that long, they feel better because somebody hears and pities. But you know what I found out? People don't have much time for that because they got their own problems. Yeah. So they give you that little bit of pity, but there's no help there. So you know what you're left with after you've done all this? Nothing. You've shared your heart with this person, and they said, I'm sorry. And that was the extent of it. So you still have your problem, and their pity only lasts that long. So now what you have to do? Find somebody else. And so you find yourself bearing your soul to some perfect stranger in the Walmart who just happened to ask you if you knew where the toothpaste was, and you tell them your life story. How many have had that happen to them? It's like, that's why I don't look at anybody at Walmart. I don't talk to them. I don't want to hear it. And we just go from person to person, sharing how terrible our life is, getting about that much help for about that long as we feel. You know, there's something, one of the old writers calls it morbid pleasure that we get from wallowing in self-pity or having other people say, oh, poor you. But the fact of the matter is there's no help in it. Yeah. There's no answer to it. It doesn't calm the storm or deal with our overwhelmed heart. But when we get beyond that point, there is help. And that help is found in the rock, Jesus Christ. Now, in order to avail ourselves of that help, we have got to come to the end of ourselves. This is why strong, quote unquote, strong people are at such a disadvantage. Because when you're strong, you just hang on for dear life and keep toughing it out instead of coming to the answer more quickly. So all of you who are envious of those strong people, don't be. Just run to Christ. The answer is found in the rock, not in your toughness. You come to the rock. Now, think about what the word cry means. From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. Think about what the word cry means. It's not synonymous with the word shedding tears, weeping. That's not that word. It's more in the line of yelling. Have you ever heard of the town crier? Okay, now, try to picture the word in context. It's not weeping, crying, but what is it in context? Is it, hey, I need some help? I don't think that's what the context gives us. The context is despair. The context is desperation. The context is an element of, you are my only hope. I cry unto you. You are the last ditch effort. Without you, I am going under. Yes. It's coming to the end of yourselves. And my friends, this is the basis of true prayer. You know, this may offend a lot of people, so be it. But the super majority, I could probably say 95%, of the prayers that are issued on planet Earth have zero value at all. Absolute, positively no value whatsoever. Many of the prayers are just things that people are repeating, words that they've heard from somebody else or somebody else wrote down and they just repeat them. There is no value in that. The Bible's completely clear on that, by the way. Christians do the same thing, only we just repeat words that we have said over and over again, or we heard somebody else when they prayed say, and we just repeat these words. And they have almost no value at all. Because they're simply words, and they are not a crying out of the heart. There's no real desire behind them. Most of them are full of self. The basis of true prayer is the coming to the end of yourself, the end of your plans, the end of your ideas, the end of your solutions, the end of your strength. You cry out to God, you are my only hope. This is the foundation, the basis of true prayer. Imagine the man from the original picture. He's on the rock, the low rock, and the storm is buffeting him. It's about to rip him off to his death. Do you remember when your brother used to get your arm like this and he'd make you say, pretty please? Or he'd make you say, uncle? Yeah. And if you didn't say it just the right way, he wouldn't quit. Imagine this guy on this rock who's in a death situation. He's overwhelmed. Who in their right mind would say, you didn't ask for help the right way? You didn't say pretty please. In that situation, a person who has any love or at all when the man comes to the end of himself, when he cries out, help, or save me, or rescue me, or I'm drowning, I'm come to the end of myself, the person above will rescue him. It doesn't require specific form. That'll help you in your prayers, by the way. It is the coming to the end of yourself. It doesn't matter what sentence structure or verb tense when you ask to be rescued. He would communicate the idea, I've come to the end of myself, and without you I have no hope. But here's a fine point that must be considered. Too often we say with our mouths what we do not really mean in our hearts. We say, rescue me from the situation, but what we mean is, rescue me from the consequences. We want God to save us from our problems, but not from what's causing the problems. Now, I tried to think of an illustration that would illustrate this, and this keeps coming back, and it's a brutal illustration, but it'll get us into the realm. And heaven forbid this should ever happen. It is a brutal illustration, I'll give you that. Say that I quit guarding my heart, and I start letting my heart do some wandering. And the next thing I know, I have let my heart fall in love with someone other than Carol. Now, the next thing you know, I say, sorry, honey, but I've found somebody else, and I leave. I found myself a new love. Now, what happens? You're reading my mind. Now, the next thing I know, well, shoot, now I don't have any place to live. That's a little rough. And then I find out, my kids are all mad at me now. I didn't expect that. I didn't think that through. And then, guess what? My whole side of the family, you know what the Vanderharts are going to think about me? If they don't kill me themselves, that whole side of the family is going to be upset. Well, what do you think about Carol's side of the family? They're going to be just as upset. And guess what? The church constitution is very clear on this issue. There's no 2 weeks notice. There's no severance pay. You're out. Now, what are you guys going to think about me? You're siding with her, right? So all of my family, all of my friends, all of my job, all of everything is gone. You understand that? So I decide, wow, that's rough. I didn't expect all of that. This is more than I bargained for. I'm overwhelmed. So I got to fix it. So I call Carol and I say, no, I don't know what she would say, to be honest with you, and I never want to find that out, okay? So I call Carol and I say, boy, I made a mistake here. I didn't count all the costs on this, and this is heavy, and I'm sorry. I want to come back home. And Carol says, come ahead. So I get in the car and I head there. I ring the doorbell. I'm standing on the porch. She opens the door, and I said, we're home. I'm standing there with my girlfriend. Anybody want to describe the conversation that's going to take place on this porch? Anybody want to describe this? Now, you say that's a brutal illustration. Do you realize that's the exact illustration the Bible uses over and over again concerning God's people? Adulterers who are wanting to bring their other lover back with them. And my friend, that's not coming to the end of yourself. That's coming to I'm reaping consequences I didn't really want here. And so I'm going to fix this thing by we'll go back and live with Carol. And as much sense as that makes, that's what kind of sense it makes when you try to bring whatever it is, your other love, back to God. Yeah, it's tearing your life up. So let's go back to God with it. It don't work that way, my friend. That's not coming to the end of yourself. And the basis of true prayer. The basis of crying is coming to the end of yourself and saying, you know what? This is what's caused the problem. It's got to go. And then I'll get the consequences. I'll get that, work through the details of the effect. But the problem itself has got to go. Somehow God's people seem to ignore that little fact, that it just doesn't work that way. Your heart's overwhelmed. You know the Lord's the only answer, but are you trying to come back to God while keeping that other love? It just will not work. You've got to come to the end of yourself. Basic facts, your hearts get overwhelmed. There is an enemy. There is a rock. True prayer is the key. And number 5, the Lord leads. The Lord leads. I want you to consider this phrase. Consider, what does this phrase mean? From the end of the earth will I cry unto thee. When my heart is overwhelmed, lead me to the rock that is higher than I. It's an interesting word, is it not? Lead me to the rock. We have all the other facts. Yes, I'm overwhelmed. Yes, there is an enemy that's creating this havoc. There is the rock, and true prayer is the answer, so I cry. And what do I get? That's not the end of it. Lead me to the rock. I come to the end of myself and I cry out to God, and what I get is, lead me. He will lead me to the rock. It's not the end when you cry out, it's the beginning. Leading implies what? Following. How do we miss that? Leading implies following. Here's the truth. You do not have to know how to deal with your problems. You do not have to know all the answers. You do not even have to know how to find that strong tower, how to get there. You don't have to know that. God knows that. He knows. You have to come to the end of yourself. You cry out to Him, and He will lead you. All you have to do is follow. He brings you to that spot. He works through that storm. He does what needs to be done. You don't have to know any of that, how that works. What you have to do is follow. Listen to what He says and follow. Our hearts do get overwhelmed. And there is an enemy that is working havoc in our lives because we allow him to. But there is a rock. That's the Lord Jesus. And true prayer is our key, that coming to the end of ourselves and crying out, you are my only hope. And when we cry, the Lord leads us into that safe haven. We have overwhelmed hearts and a high rock.